Imagine for a moment, what if your own DNA, like, held a hidden code? A story stretching back maybe 20,000 years, connecting continents, blending cultures, maybe even rewriting history a bit. Would you want to know what it says? Well, today that's exactly what we're doing. We're diving deep into the fascinating and sometimes debated story of the Algeria gene. Our mission here is to unpack a whole stack of sources, scientific papers, research notes, historical accounts. We want to understand what makes Algeria's gene pool so unique, so complex, and, well, so ancient. And just to be clear, this is all about what the scientists have found, what researchers are analyzing, and what historians point to from anthropological and genomic studies.
Yeah, and it's really compelling because Algeria's geography is, well, it's crucial here. It's always been this crossroads, right? And that's dramatically shaped its genetic story. It sits there in North Africa, sure, but genetically, wow, it's a real melting pot.
Okay, so a melting pot. Let's start peeling back those layers then. What makes Algeria's genetic makeup so distinct? You said it's more than just North African?
Exactly. It's got threads of Berber, Arab, European, even Sub-Saharan African ancestry woven through it. It's quite intricate. You have to picture the region historically. It was basically a highway for migration, connecting the Mediterranean, the Sahara, the Sahel, a real hub for human movement for thousands of years.
And some pretty recent studies, the ones in journals like Cell and Nature Communications, they found something quite surprising.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
That Algerians share ancestry with early Eurasian populations who actually migrated back into Africa.
Like into Africa. So wait, people who originally left Africa eventually came back and mixed in.
That's what the genetics suggests. It complicates the simpler, older picture of humans just migrating out of Africa. It shows this more dynamic back and forth movement. It's almost like history folded back on itself, leaving a trace right there in the genome. Really challenges those linear models, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so let's get into the specifics. What data really highlights this deep, complex story in Algeria? What's the first thing that jumps out? Well, one really striking fact is the Y-DNA haplogroup E1b1b. Over 40% of Algerian men carry this.
E1b1b. Okay. And what does that tell us?
It's strongly linked to the indigenous Berber populations. And researchers believe this specific haplogroup might have originated way back, like over 20,000 years ago, probably in East Africa.
Okay, maybe let's pause there for a sec. For listeners who aren't deep into genetics, what exactly is a haplogroup? And why is looking at Y-DNA or mitochondrial DNA so important for tracing these ancient lines?
Good question. Think of a haplogroup as a big genetic family or clan. Everyone in that group shares a common ancestor way back, identified by specific markers on their DNA. Y-DNA is passed just from father to son, so tracking it is like following a paternal surname back through generations. It gives you a direct line to male ancestry.
Okay, father to son. Got it.
And mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is passed down from a mother to all her children, but only daughters pass it on further, so that traces the direct maternal line.
Ah, okay, so two different pathways back in time.
Exactly. They're like these amazing genetic breadcrumbs that let us piece together ancient migrations and population histories.
Makes sense. So E1b1b points to ancient Berber paternal roots. What about the maternal side in Algeria? You mentioned mitochondrial DNA.
Right. On the maternal side, we see a high frequency of U6 mitochondrial haplogroups. These are widely considered key markers for North African maternal ancestry.
And the really interesting part.
The really interesting part is that some of these U6 lineages have been traced back to Paleolithic Iberia. That's modern-day Spain and Portugal.
Wow, Iberia. So that suggests movement between Europe and North Africa, not just one way.
Precisely. A significant two-way flow, potentially going back thousands of years. It wasn't just people moving north. And then there's the autosomal DNA. This gives us the bigger picture, the overall genetic mix.
Right. Autosomal is inherited from both parents, mixing everything together.
Exactly. It captures a whole ancestral tapestry. And for the average Algerian genome, the breakdown is roughly something like this. About 60% North African Maghrebi.
Okay, the largest chunk.
Then maybe 20% European, mostly Iberian it seems, around 10% Sub-Saharan African, and another 10% or so Near Eastern from the Arabian Peninsula.
That is quite a blend, 60, 20, 10, 10.
Yeah, and that breakdown, it stunningly maps onto thousands of years of history. The trade routes, conquests, migrations, cultural exchange, it's all reflected there.
So these percentages aren't just numbers, they're echoes of major historical events and processes.
Absolutely. It really makes you ask, what deeper story are these genetic proportions telling us about how populations interacted across vast regions and timescales?
It's incredibly deep. But this genetic story, it doesn't just stay in the ancient past, does it? It bumps right up against modern identity politics. Sometimes it gets a bit controversial.
Oh, definitely.
They do.
It inevitably intersects with how people see themselves and their history today. Take the long-standing discussion within Algeria about identity specifically,
Yeah.
Arab versus Berber, or Amazi identity.
Right. That's a significant cultural dynamic.
Well, genetic findings have really stirred that pot. When studies show that indigenous Berber genetic markers are actually dominant in the population, despite centuries of Arabization, culturally and linguistically.
That must spark some debate.
It has. Some Amazi activists point directly to this genetic data as evidence supporting calls for greater cultural recognition or autonomy. It shows how science can get pulled into these complex identity questions. Again, we're just reporting what the sources and discussions indicate here.
Understood. And it's not just about ancient identities. More recent history leaves a mark too, right? Like the French colonial period.
Yes, the period from 1830 to 1962. It left political scars, of course, but some studies suggest potential, though often small, genetic traces too. Certain European Y DNA lineages, for instance, seem to show a slight increase in frequency, particularly in some urban populations.
But there's pushback on that interpretation, isn't there?
There is, and it's important to mention the controversy. Some researchers, often from the region itself, argue that Western labs might sometimes overemphasize these European lineages.
Why would they do that?
The claim is that it could potentially, maybe unintentionally, skew the findings towards a more Eurocentric view of North African history. It highlights this ongoing debate about perspective and potential bias in scientific interpretation. Again, a point of contention in the research community.
That's a really crucial point about perspective in science. How do researchers even try to navigate that, especially when the data touches such sensitive nerves? Are there methods to, ensure objectivity?
It's a constant challenge. Good practice involves things like using really strict statistical methods, comparing results against diverse global genetic databases, not just European ones. And increasingly, there's a move towards collaboration, working with local researchers and communities to make sure interpretations are grounded and culturally aware. Transparency is key, presenting the data clearly, acknowledging limitations, and being open to different readings rather than pushing just one story.
Right, transparency is vital. Okay, shifting gears slightly, another area where genetics has challenged older ideas is the Sahara barrier theory. What was that about?
Yeah, for a long time, the prevailing idea was that the Sahara Desert acted like a massive wall, genetically separating North Africa from Sub-Saharan Africa, pretty much isolating them from each other.
Made intuitive sense, I guess. A giant desert.
Right. But the Algerian genome data, and North African genetics more broadly, tells a different story. It clearly shows significant gene flow from Sub-Saharan Africa into the north.
So the barrier wasn't absolute.
Not at all. Especially during periods like the Trans-Saharan trade, there was considerable interaction and genetic exchange. It totally contradicts that old idea of North Africa being genetically cut off from the rest of the continent. History was much more connected.
Okay, so we've covered ancient migrations, back migrations, haplogroups, autosomal DNA, modern identity debates, colonial legacies, debunked theories. Pulling it all together, what's the big takeaway? What makes the Algerian genetic story so, well, profound?
I think the key idea is that Algeria's gene pool is like a living archive. It's this incredible record of human movement, resilience, adaptation, but also the impacts of things like conquest and colonialism. It's not just abstract history or identity politics. It's fundamentally about survival and how populations adapt over huge stretches of time.
Adaptation. You mean like physical adaptations reflected in the genes?
Exactly. These genetic markers aren't just historical footnotes. Many of them likely relate to functional adaptations. Think about populations living in or near the Sahara for millennia.
Okay, like what?
Well, perhaps genetic variants that help with heat tolerance, or maybe more efficient water retention. Or think about the shift to agriculture and pastoralism, the ability to digest lactose, milk sugar, into adulthood. That's a genetic trait, lactase persistence, and it would have been a huge advantage for populations relying on dairy.
Ah, so these aren't just passive markers of where ancestors came from, but active biological traits shaped by the environment and lifestyle.
Precisely. They're evidence of natural selection at work, shaping biology in response to specific challenges and opportunities over thousands of years. It makes the Algerian genome not just a map of history, but a blueprint for adaptation in a unique part of the world.
That's a powerful way to think about it. A living archive, a blueprint for adaptation. It really has been a fascinating deep dive today, exploring the history written in Algeria's DNA.
Absolutely. And maybe as we finish, we can leave you, the listener, with a few things to think about, questions to continue your own exploration, perhaps. When we uncover these deep genetic histories, how should they intersect with things like national identity or cultural policy, or even how history is taught?
Is the genome just cold, hard data? Or is it something more? Is it heritage?
And who really gets to narrate this story? Is it the scientists interpreting the data? Is it the people whose ancestry is reflected in that data?
Or maybe needs to be a conversation between both.
Difficult questions, definitely worth pondering.